They called her the Cursed Bride. For 3 years, Serafina Voss carried the shame of a barren marriage, blamed for a sin that was never hers. She scrubbed bloodstains from the Alpha's bedsheets, cooked meals she wasn't allowed to eat, and slept on a thin mat beside the fireplace like a forgotten hound. But they didn't know she was carrying twins. They didn't know the father wasn't who everyone believed. And they certainly didn't know that the fragile Omega they kicked and spat upon held the blood of an extinct royal line in her veins. When her mate discovers she's pregnant and realizes the pups can't possibly be his, he doesn't just divorce her, he sentences her to death. But the moon goddess has other plans. Because the true father of those twins, he's the Alpha King. And he's been searching for her for 3 very long years. Get ready. The Cursed Bride is about to become the most powerful woman on the continent, and every single person who wronged her will kneel before her throne. The Iron Vale pack house smelled of burnt porridge and old misery. Serafina Voss knelt on the cold stone floor of the kitchen, her swollen fingers wrapped around a scrub brush that had lost most of its bristles 2 winters ago. Her knees ached against the unforgiving ground, her lower back throbbed with a pain she didn't yet understand. She was 22 years old, but her body felt ancient, worn down by years of labor that never seemed to end. You missed a spot. The voice slithered across the kitchen like oil on water. Serafina didn't need to look up to recognize it. Odessa Crane, the pack's gamma female and her husband's not-so-secret mistress, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed over her silk robe. "I'll get it," Serafina whispered, scrubbing harder at an invisible stain. "You'll get it?" Odessa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. She crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, her bare foot connecting with the bucket of soapy water. It toppled, sending a gray wave across the floor Serafina had spent 2 hours cleaning. "Now you'll get it properly. Alpha Cormac wants this floor spotless before the delegation arrives tonight. If it isn't, I'll make sure he knows exactly who to blame." Serafina's hands trembled, but she kept her head down. 3 years. 3 years of this torment. And she had learned that silence was her only shield. She had been 17 when her parents died in the border wars, leaving her orphaned and packless. The former Alpha of Iron Vale, a kind old man named Brennan, had taken her in. But Brennan died 6 months later and his son, Cormac Thorne, inherited everything, including her. Cormac had taken one look at Serafina, small, blonde, wolfless, and seen an opportunity. A political marriage to a packless Omega would offend no allies. She would be useful for labor, invisible to guests, and easily discarded. Their wedding night had been cold. Cormac had barely touched her, grunting something about trying for heirs before rolling over and falling asleep. Within a month, Odessa had moved into the pack house. Within a year, everyone knew the truth. Serafina was the wife in name only, while Odessa warmed the Alpha's bed. But it was the accusation that broke her. Barren, they called her. Defective. Cursed. 3 years without a pregnancy, and the blame fell entirely on her shoulders. No one questioned whether Cormac might be the problem. No one cared. The whispers became shouts, and the shouts became daily humiliations. Serafina wrung out her rag, the icy water numbing her cracked hands. As she bent forward, a wave of nausea rolled through her stomach. She paused, pressing a palm to her abdomen. The sickness had started nearly 2 months ago. Every morning, a violent churning that left her dizzy and weak. She knew what it meant. The realization terrified her more than any beating ever could. Because she hadn't shared Cormac's bed in over 4 months. He had declared her too disgusting to touch after she burned a roast last autumn. Which meant the pups growing inside her. She was certain now there were 2, could feel them like twin flames behind her navel, were not his. They belonged to a night she barely remembered. A night during the summer solstice gathering, when she had wandered away from the servants' tent, overwhelmed by grief and loneliness. A night when a stranger with eyes like molten gold had found her crying by the river. He had been kind, gentle. He had touched her face and called her beautiful, and for one desperate hour she had believed him. She never learned his name. By morning, he was gone, and she convinced herself it had been a dream. But dreams don't leave you pregnant. Serafina scrubbed harder, willing the fear away. If Cormac discovered the truth, he wouldn't just divorce her. Adultery by a Luna, even a Luna in name only, was punishable by death in the old laws. He would drag her before the pack and tear out her throat himself. She had to run. Tonight, during the chaos of the delegation's arrival, she would slip away into the forest and never look back. But fate, as always, had other plans. Serafina! The roar echoed through the pack house, rattling the copper pots hanging above the stove. Cormac's voice, and he sounded furious. She rose on shaking legs, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, then jerking away before anyone could notice. Whatever happened next, she had to protect them. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to walk into the worst moment of her life. Serafina found Cormac in the great hall, standing before the massive stone fireplace that bore the Iron Veil crest, a snarling wolf wrapped in chains. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. Beside him stood Odessa, wearing a smile that made Serafina's blood run cold, and in Cormac's hand, held between two fingers like a dead rat, was a small glass vial. Serafina's heart stopped. The pregnancy tonic, the herbal mixture she had been secretly brewing to ease her morning sickness. She had hidden it in the floorboards beneath her sleeping mat. Care to explain this? Cormac's voice was deceptively calm, the way a coiled snake is calm before it strikes. I don't know what that is, Serafina stammered, hating the weakness in her voice. Liar. Odessa stepped forward, eyes glittering. I found it this morning. Moonwort and fern root, a remedy for pregnancy nausea. She turned to Cormac. Your barren little wife has been hiding something, my love. Cormac's nostrils flared. He crossed the distance between them in 3 predatory strides, grabbing Serafina's chin and forcing her to meet his eyes. Is it true? He snarled. Are you pregnant? Every instinct screamed at her to lie, but the terror had frozen her tongue, and her silence was answer enough. Something shifted in Cormac's expression. For a fleeting moment, Serafina saw what might have been hope, the desperate desire for an heir that had driven him to cruelty for 3 long years. Then his eyes dropped to her stomach, and his nostrils flared again. The scent. Whatever he smelled there, it wasn't his. The hope curdled into something far worse. Who? The word came out guttural, barely human. Cormac, please. Who? He backhanded her with such force that she sprawled across the stone floor, her cheek splitting against the edge of a chair. Blood bloomed hot and immediate, dripping onto the gray stone. I don't know, she sobbed, and it was the truth. I don't know his name. It was the solstice gathering. I was alone, and he... You hoard yourself to a stranger? Cormac's laugh was unhinged, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. My wife. My Luna. Spreading her legs for some nameless rogue while I provided her food and shelter. You never wanted me. The words tore from Serafina's throat before she could stop them. You gave me to Odessa's cruelty. You called me disgusting. You haven't touched me in months. The silence that followed was deafening. Cormac stared at her, something dangerous crystallizing in his gray eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. Summon the pack. All of them. Now. Odessa's smile widened. What are you going to do? Cormac turned his back on Serafina, walking toward the great doors that led to the courtyard. I'm going to show them what happens to faithless brides. Within the hour, the entire Iron Veil pack had gathered in the central courtyard. Warriors, elders, servants, children, over 200 wolves standing in the torchlight, their breath misting in the cold autumn air. Seraphina stood on the wooden platform in the center, her wrists bound with silver-laced rope that burned her skin. Blood still dripped from the gash on her cheek. Her thin dress offered no protection against the biting wind, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the cold inside her. She could feel the twins stirring, restless, as if they sensed her terror. She sent them a silent promise. I will protect you. No matter what happens, I will protect you. Cormac ascended the platform and the crowd fell silent. He didn't look at her. He looked at his people, at the faces that feared and followed him, and he smiled the smile of a man about to make an example. Tonight, Cormac announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard, I bring before you a matter of pack law, a matter of betrayal, a matter of blood. He finally turned to Seraphina, and his eyes held no mercy. My wife, my Luna, carries bastards in her womb, pups that are not mine. The gasp that rippled through the crowd was a living thing, and Seraphina knew, with sickening certainty, that she was about to die. The murmurs of the crowd swelled into a roaring tide. Seraphina could see their faces, some shocked, some gleeful, some baring their teeth in anticipation. 3 years she had lived among these people, served them, and now they looked at her like she was meat. Odessa stood at the edge of the platform basking in the spectacle. With Seraphina gone, she would finally be Luna in truth. Silence! Cormac raised his hand and the crowd obeyed. He paced around Seraphina like a wolf circling wounded prey. For 3 years I endured the shame of a barren mate. I gave this woman a home, and how does she repay me? He gripped her jaw and forced her face toward the crowd. She carries a stranger's bastards. She spits on the Iron Veil name. I never wanted to betray you, Seraphina whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. You abandoned me first. You threw me away like garbage. You were garbage, Cormac hissed, low enough that only she could hear. I should have left you to rot in the gutter where your parents' deaths put you. He released her face and turned back to the crowd. Under the old laws, the punishment for a Luna's adultery is death. The faithless mate shall be stripped of her bond and executed by the Alpha's own hand. A cheer rose from somewhere in the crowd, then another. Within seconds, the courtyard was thundering with bloodlust. This is it, Seraphina thought. This is how I die. But the twins. Something inside her cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice over a deep, dark lake. Beneath the surface, something ancient stirred. Wait. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that demanded obedience. The cheering died. The crowd parted. An elderly woman stepped forward, her silver hair braided down her back, her eyes milky with age but sharp with intelligence. Elder Isolde, a member of the High Council who had been visiting Ironvale to oversee the delegation, and keeper of the sacred traditions. Even Cormac hesitated. What is it, Elder? He asked, his tone respectful but impatient. Before you spill blood, Alpha, Isolde said, approaching the platform with slow, deliberate steps, there is the matter of verification. The old laws require the accused to face the moontide, mirror. If she lies, the mirror will reveal it. If she speaks truth. The elder's eyes flickered to Seraphina with something that might have been pity. The goddess may yet have mercy. Cormac scoffed. She admitted her guilt. What more verification do we need? The law is the law, Isolde said firmly. Unless you wish to rule as a tyrant who ignores the sacred customs, you will allow the mirror to judge. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Cormac's jaw worked, his pride warring with tradition. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Fine. Bring the mirror. But when it confirms her treachery, I will carry out the sentence without further delay. Two servants hurried into the pack house, returning moments later with an object draped in black velvet. They set it on the platform, and Isolde pulled away the covering. The moontide mirror was ancient, its frame carved from bone that had yellowed with centuries. The glass itself seemed to swirl with silver mist, like trapped moonlight. Serafina had heard stories about it, how it could see into a wolf's soul, reveal their deepest truths, expose their darkest lies. Place your hand upon the glass, Isolde instructed, and speak. Serafina's bound hands trembled as she reached out. The moment her fingers touched the mirror, a shock of cold raced up her arm. The mist inside the glass began to churn violently. Did you lie with a male who was not your mate? Isolde asked. Yes, Serafina whispered. The mist glowed white. Truth. Do you carry pups that are not Alpha Cormacs? Yes. White again. Cormac snarled in vindication. There. Executor. But Isolde held up a hand. One more question. Her ancient eyes locked onto Serafina's, and her voice dropped to something almost gentle. Child, do you know who the father is? Do you know his name? His pack? His bloodline? Serafina shook her head, tears spilling freely. No. I swear on my life. I don't know who he was. The mirror pulsed white. But then something impossible happened. The white light shifted, spiraling, deepening into a brilliant gold that filled the entire courtyard. The crowd gasped, stumbling backward. Even Cormac retreated, shielding his eyes. In the depths of the mirror, an image formed. A crest, a wolf standing beneath a crescent moon, crowned with stars. Elder Isolde staggered, her hand flying to her heart. Impossible, she breathed. What? Cormac demanded, blinking against the fading light. What is that crest? Isolde turned to him, her face pale as bone. That is the royal seal of the Valdris bloodline, the crest of the Alpha King. Her voice shook. The father of those twins is Fenris Valdris, the ruler of all packs, the most powerful wolf on the continent. The courtyard erupted into chaos, and somewhere, hundreds of miles away in a fortress carved into the northern mountains, a man with eyes like molten gold suddenly looked up from his war maps, his hand pressing against his chest where his heart had begun to pound. With inexplicable urgency. Found you, his wolf growled from deep within. Finally. The chaos in the courtyard was deafening. The royal crest still burned in their minds, a symbol most had only seen in ancient texts. Cormac's face had gone ashen. He rounded on Elder Isolde. It's a trick. The Alpha King hasn't taken a mate in over a decade. He's a ghost. The mirror cannot be manipulated, Isolde said quietly. It shows only truth. Then the truth is wrong. Cormac grabbed Serafina by the throat, lifting her until her toes scraped the platform. Who did you really lie with? Serafina couldn't breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. Her bound hands clawed uselessly at his iron grip. Answer me. But she had no answer to give. She didn't understand any of this. The man by the river. Golden eyes, gentle hands, a voice like rolling thunder. He had been a stranger. A wanderer. He couldn't possibly be. He is. The voice in her head wasn't her own. Serafina's eyes flew wide. For 22 years she had been silent inside. No wolf, no inner beast. The healers had declared her defective at 16, when her first shift never came. But now, something was waking up. He is ours. And so are they. The twins. She could feel them more clearly now. Two bright pulses of life beneath her heart. They were responding to something. Calling out to a power that had been locked away inside her since birth. Cormac's grip tightened. I'll kill you myself. I don't care whose bastards you carry. No. The word exploded from somewhere deep in Serafina's core. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it didn't need to be. A shockwave of pure energy erupted from her body, hurling Cormac backward. He flew off the platform, crashing into a group of his own warriors, sending them sprawling like dominoes. Serafina dropped to her knees, gasping. The silver-laced ropes around her wrists had disintegrated, leaving behind skin that glowed faintly with an inner light. The courtyard went deathly silent. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling, but not with fear. With power. A power she had never known existed. "What?" she breathed. "We are awake now," the voice said, and this time Serafina recognized it. Her wolf. Her wolf was finally speaking. "They tried to bury us. They fed us poison and called us broken. But the pups have unlocked what was sealed. We are whole again, Serafina. We are finally whole." Serafina rose slowly to her feet. Around her, wolves were dropping to their knees. Not in respect, but in involuntary submission. Her aura pressed down on them like a physical weight, forcing even the strongest warriors to bow. Only Cormac remained standing, legs shaking with the effort, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. "What are you?" he whispered. Serafina didn't know how to answer. She didn't know what she was, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was no longer the woman he could hurt. "I'm leaving," she said, and her voice resonated with an authority she had never possessed before. "Me and my children, we're leaving this place." Cormac's shock curdled back into rage. "You think I'll let you walk away? You're still my wife, my property. Guards, seize her." But the guards didn't move. They couldn't. The weight of her presence pinned them in place. Serafina stepped off the platform. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship's prow. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get away, far away, before her strength gave out. Because despite the power surging through her veins, she could feel her body weakening. The awakening had cost her something. The edges of her vision were darkening. The twins were draining her reserves, demanding energy she didn't have. "Hold on," her wolf urged. "He's coming. Our mate is coming." Serafina stumbled through the pack-house gates and into the dark forest beyond. Behind her, she heard Cormac's enraged howl, heard him rallying his warriors for pursuit. She ran. She ran until her legs gave out, until she collapsed at the base of an ancient oak, her arms wrapped protectively around her stomach. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was a pair of golden eyes glowing in the darkness between the trees. And the last thing she heard was a voice, deep and fierce and impossibly tender. "I've got you now. Both of you. All three of you." Then the world went black. Serafina woke to warmth. Not the damp, grudging warmth of a fire in a drafty room, but true, encompassing warmth. Like being wrapped in sunlight. She was lying on something impossibly soft, covered in furs that smelled of cedar and snow and something else. Something that made her wolf purr with contentment. Mate. Her eyes flew open. The room was cavernous, carved into gray stone. Massive windows revealed jagged peaks and endless white. Mountains she had only seen in paintings. A fire roared in an enormous hearth, and tapestries depicted wolves running beneath star-filled skies. She was not in Iron Vale anymore. "You're safe." The voice came from beside the bed. Serafina turned her head, and her breath caught in her throat. He was sitting in a high-backed chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He was exactly as she remembered from that night by the river, and yet entirely different. His hair was dark as midnight, his face all sharp angles and brutal beauty, softened only by the concern in his eyes. Those eyes, golden as molten amber. The eyes that had haunted her dreams for 3 months. "You," Serafina breathed. "Me." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were too busy cataloging her, the fading bruise on her cheek, the raw skin at her wrists, the hollow exhaustion in her face. With each wound he noted, his expression darkened further. "Who did this to you?" It wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in velvet, and Seraphina found herself answering before she could think. My husband, Cormac, Thorn, Alpha of Ironvale. The man's hands clenched into fists. The fire in the hearth roared higher, responding to his fury. Your husband. The words were bitten off, sharp as broken glass. You have a husband. Yes. It was an arranged marriage. I had no choice. He never. Seraphina stopped, shame flooding her cheeks. I didn't know who you were. That night by the river, I thought you were a traveler. A rogue. I never imagined. That I was Fenris Valdris? He stood, and Seraphina realized just how large he was. Not just tall, massive, built like a warrior god, radiating an aura of power that made the air feel thick. The Alpha King? The ghost, who rules from the northern citadel? Seraphina's heart hammered. Yes. Fenris moved to the window, staring out at the snow-covered peaks. His jaw was tight, the muscles in his back coiled with barely restrained emotion. I searched for you, he said quietly. After that night, I tore apart every pack, every territory, looking for the woman with violet eyes who smelled like moonflowers and rain. But you had no pack scent, no wolf signature. You were invisible to every tracker I sent. I didn't have a wolf then, Seraphina whispered. She was sleeping, suppressed. I don't fully understand it myself. Fenris turned back to face her. I know. I've spent 3 months piecing together what happened to you. What they did to your bloodline. He crossed to the bed, kneeling beside it so his eyes were level with hers. This close, she could see the flecks of copper in his golden irises, could feel the bond between them humming like a plucked string. Seraphina, he said, and her name in his mouth was a revelation. You are not a cursed bride. You are not defective or broken. You are the last living heir of the Lunaris bloodline, a family of wolves so powerful that the other packs conspired to wipe them out centuries ago. Seraphina shook her head, overwhelmed. That's impossible. I'm an orphan. My parents were nobody. Your parents were murdered to hide you, Fenris said gently. The people who raised you fed you moonsbane root from infancy. It's an ancient poison that suppresses a wolf completely. You were never barren, Seraphina. You were caged. He reached out, his hand hovering over her stomach with a reverence that made her eyes sting with tears. And these children, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Our children. They are the reason the cage finally broke. Seraphina's mind reeled. Everything she had believed about herself, every cruel word, every whispered insult, every moment of self-hatred was built on lies. The Lunaris bloodline, she repeated slowly. I've never even heard of it. Fenris rose and moved to an ornate chest in the corner of the room. He returned with a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age, and sat on the edge of the bed. The Lunaris wolves were the first children of the moon goddess, he explained, opening the book to reveal hand-drawn illustrations of silver wolves running through fields of stars. They were healers, seers, conduits of divine power. For centuries they kept balance in our world. What happened to them? Fenris's expression hardened. Fear happened. The Alpha Council grew threatened by their power. So they decided to eliminate them entirely. He turned to a page depicting a burning village, wolves fleeing into the night. 200 years ago, the Council orchestrated the Crimson Purge. Every known Lunaris wolf was hunted down and slaughtered. The Council declared the bloodline extinct and forbade anyone from speaking of them. Seraphina felt sick. But I survived. Your grandmother survived, Fenris corrected. She was a child during the Purge, hidden by a human family. She married a low-ranking warrior and passed the secret to your mother, who did the same. They diluted the bloodline, hoping it would fade. But it didn't. No. Fenris's eyes burned with intensity. It concentrated. 3 generations of Lunaris women, each suppressed by Moonsbane. Your mother was discovered when pregnant with you. She and your father were killed, and you were handed to Ironvale. Ironvale, Seraphina whispered, horror dawning. Brennan, the old alpha, he knew? He was kind to you because he felt guilty, Fenris said. But yes, he knew. And when he died, his son inherited the secret along with the pack. Cormac continued the Moonsbane dosing. He kept you weak, kept you barren, kept you exactly where the council wanted you, invisible and powerless. Seraphina's hands curled into fists, her nails biting into her palms. All those years of being told she was defective. All those nights crying herself to sleep, believing she was cursed. It had all been deliberate, calculated, a conspiracy spanning generations. Why didn't they just kill me? She asked. A Lunaris death carries a curse. They needed you to die naturally. Through neglect, heartbreak, the slow withering of a suppressed soul. Fenris's jaw tightened. They almost succeeded. Seraphina touched her stomach, feeling the twins shift beneath her palm. But the pregnancy changed everything. Yes. Fenris placed his hand over hers, the contact sending warmth flooding through her veins. Lunaris power is tied to creation, to life. When you conceived our children, your wolf finally had something worth fighting through the poison for. The Moonsbane couldn't hold her anymore. Our children, Seraphina repeated. You barely know me. We spent one night together. One night was enough. Fenris lifted her hand to his lips. You are my fated mate. I knew it the moment I touched you by that river. Seraphina wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she mattered to someone. But 3 years of cruelty had taught her caution. What happens now? She asked. Cormac won't let me go. The council. Let them come. Fenris's voice dropped to a growl. I am the Alpha King. You and our children are under my protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens the crown. He offered his hand. A council of elders is arriving tonight. They felt the power surge when you awakened. Some will be allies. Others will want to finish what the Crimson Purge started. Seraphina took his hand and rose on unsteady legs. Her body was still weak, still recovering from the awakening, but something fierce was building in her chest. Then we'll face them together, she said. Fenris smiled, a real smile this time, one that transformed his harsh features into something breathtakingly beautiful. Together, he agreed, but first, we need to get you dressed, because walking into a room full of ancient wolves in nothing but a nightgown sends the wrong message. Despite everything, Seraphina laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 3 years. But the laughter died when a horn sounded in the distance, 3 long, mournful notes that echoed off the mountains. Fenris's smile vanished. His head snapped toward the window, his eyes narrowing. That's not the elders, he said, his voice suddenly cold as the peaks outside. That's a war horn. Ironvale's war horn. Seraphina's blood turned to ice. Cormac, she breathed. He followed me. Fenris was already moving toward the door, his body shifting, bones cracking as his wolf began to emerge. Stay here, he commanded. My guards will protect you. Fenris! He paused at the threshold, looking back at her with eyes that had turned fully gold, the beast barely contained beneath his skin. He will never touch you again, Seraphina. I swear it on my crown and my life. Then he was gone, and the sound of howling filled the mountain air. Seraphina pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the twins flutter anxiously. Don't worry, she told them silently. Your father is the most powerful wolf alive. But deep down, a cold whisper of doubt remained. Because Cormac Thorne didn't fight fair, and he never, ever came alone. The great hall of the northern citadel was carved from black granite, its vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing light across the faces of Fenris's assembled warriors, the Obsidian Guard, 50 of the deadliest wolves on the continent. Seraphina stood beside Fenris on the raised dais, wrapped in a borrowed cloak of white fur. She had refused to stay hidden in the bedchamber. These were her problems. She would face them. The massive iron doors groaned open. Cormac Thorne strode in like he owned the place, flanked by 30 warriors, their armor frost-covered from the mountain crossing. But it was the figure beside him that made Seraphina's stomach clench. Odessa. Of course she had come. Cormac stopped in the center of the hall, his gray eyes sweeping the room before landing on Seraphina. Something flickered across his face. Hunger, regret, possessiveness, before hardening into cold determination. "I've come for my wife," Cormac announced, his voice echoing off the stone. "She was taken from Iron Vale against her will. I demand her return." A murmur rippled through Fenris's guards. Several hands moved to sword hilts. Fenris didn't move. He stood perfectly still, radiating an aura of absolute authority that made Cormac's wolves shrink back despite themselves. Against her will? Fenris's voice was soft, but it carried like thunder. "Interesting, because I recall finding her collapsed in the snow, fleeing your territory after you publicly sentenced her to death." "A misunderstanding," Cormac said smoothly. "I was deceived by false evidence. The mirror's vision proves her innocence. She didn't knowingly betray me. She was seduced by—" He hesitated, clearly struggling with the next words. "By your majesty. The fault lies with the crown, not my wife." Seraphina's hands curled into fists. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. "You called me defective," she said, stepping forward, voice trembling with rage. "You let Odessa grind her heel into my fingers. You starved me, blamed me for a barrenness you caused with your poison. Seraphina, you called my children bastards. You were going to tear out my throat. And now you want me back because I'm valuable?" "You're my mate," Cormac insisted. "The bond was severed the moment you rejected me." Her voice rang with finality. "You don't get to claim me now." Cormac's face contorted with ugly desperation. "You think this king wants you for anything more than your bloodline? You're a broodmare to him, just like you were to me." Fenris moved. One moment on the dais, the next he had Cormac by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Cormac's warriors surged forward, but the Obsidian Guard formed a wall of drawn blades. "Speak of her that way again," Fenris said, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the hall, "and I will scatter your entrails across every packed territory as a warning." Cormac's face purpled. His legs kicked uselessly in the air. "Fenris." Seraphina's voice cut through the tension. "Don't. He's not worth starting a war over." For a long moment, Fenris didn't move. His wolf was clearly screaming for blood, every line of his body taut with the desire to kill. Then, slowly, he released his grip. Cormac crumpled to the floor, gasping and clutching his bruised throat. "You're right," Fenris said coldly. "He isn't worth it. But he has violated my territory by bringing armed wolves uninvited. By ancient law, I demand satisfaction." Elder Isolde's voice echoed from the doorway. The ancient woman had followed the delegation, along with 4 other robed figures, the Council of Elders. "The Alpha King speaks true," Isolde confirmed. "A trial of satisfaction may be invoked." Fenris smiled coldly. "Single combat. Tomorrow at dawn. In the Frost Circle." Cormac staggered to his feet, his eyes darting between Fenris and the Elders. He was trapped, and he knew it. Refusing would brand him a coward. Accepting meant fighting the most powerful alpha alive. "I accept," Cormac said, through gritted teeth. "But I demand a concession. If I win, Seraphina returns with me. Willingly." "And if you lose," Fenris countered, Iron Veil falls under Crown jurisdiction. Your title is stripped. Your pack answers to me. The stakes hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Cormac's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded. Done. As the Iron Veil wolves were escorted to guest quarters under heavy guard, Odessa lingered. Her eyes found Seraphina's across the hall, and her lips curved into a venomous smile. Enjoy your moment, little Omega, she whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. It won't last. Then she was gone, leaving Seraphina with a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Something was wrong. Cormac had accepted too easily. He was planning something, and Seraphina had a terrible feeling she knew what it was. The Frost Circle was an ancient arena carved into a frozen lake at the base of the citadel. Sheer cliffs of ice surrounded the fighting ground. The seats were filled with wolves from both packs, their breath misting in the pre-dawn cold. Seraphina sat in the royal viewing box, hands clenched in her lap. Beside her, Elder Isolde watched with milky, unreadable eyes. You're afraid, the elder observed quietly. Fenris is the strongest wolf alive, Seraphina said. He'll win. That's not what I asked. Seraphina swallowed. Cormac is a coward and a schemer. He wouldn't have accepted this challenge unless he had a plan. Isolde nodded slowly. You've learned to read him well. 3 years of survival will do that. She paused. Do you trust your mate? I barely know him. That's not what I asked either. Before Seraphina could respond, a horn sounded. The crowd fell silent. Fenris emerged from the northern entrance, stripped to the waist despite the freezing temperature. His body was a landscape of muscle and old scars, each one a testament to battles survived. He walked to the center of the circle and stood motionless, waiting. From the southern entrance came Cormac. He too was bare-chested, his frame leaner than Fenris's but wiry with desperate strength. He carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed he had already won. Seraphina's unease deepened. Elder Malachi, the eldest of the council, rose from his seat. Single combat, no weapons, no outside interference. Victory by submission, unconsciousness, or death. He raised a withered hand. Begin. Fenris didn't charge. He waited, letting Cormac make the first move. Cormac shifted instantly, his body exploding into the form of a massive black wolf with gray markings. He was fast, faster than Seraphina remembered, and he lunged for Fenris's throat with savage precision. Fenris sidestepped, still in human form. His hand shot out, catching Cormac by the scruff and hurling him across the ice. Cormac skidded, claws scrabbling for purchase before spinning and launching himself again. This time, Fenris met him head-on. His shift was instantaneous. One moment a man, the next a wolf of impossible size. His fur was the deep gold of autumn leaves, his eyes blazing like twin suns. He collided with Cormac mid-air, and the impact sent shockwaves across the frozen lake. The fight was brutal. Teeth and claws flashed, blood splattered across the white ice. Cormac fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but Fenris was relentless, driving him back with every exchange. Within minutes, it was clear who would win. Fenris pinned Cormac to the ice, his massive jaws clamped around the black wolf's throat. One bite, and it would be over. Submit. Fenris's command echoed through the arena, psychic and undeniable. Cormac whimpered. His legs went limp, his tail tucked between his legs. The crowd erupted. Seraphina sagged with relief, her hand pressing to her racing heart. It was over. It was finally. Now! Odessa's scream cut through the cheering. From the crowd, 3 hooded figures rose, humans with hands glowing sickly green. Witches. Cormac had brought witches. They hurled their power at Fenris. The blast sent him crashing into the ice wall. He collapsed, his golden fur smoking. Fenris! Seraphina was on her feet. Cormac shifted to human form, laughing. Did you think I'd fight fair? Again. Kill him. The witches raised their hands, green fire building. Seraphina vaulted over the railing, landing on the ice. The crowd gasped. They're hurting our mate. Her wolf surged forward, and this time, Seraphina didn't fight it. The shift took her like a wave, painful and glorious. Her skin erupted in fur the color of pure moonlight. She was massive, larger than Cormac, nearly as large as Fenris, and furious. The witches turned their attack toward her, but Seraphina absorbed it. The green fire dissolved, consumed by the silver light radiating from her fur. Lunaris wolves are conduits of divine power. The witches' faces twisted in terror. She pounced, pinning one witch to the ice. "Call them off," she growled, "or I tear them apart." Cormac stared, all color draining from his face. He had never seen her wolf. He had believed she was still the broken creature he'd tormented. "I said call them off!" The command crushed him to his knees. "I yield. The witches are mine. I yield." The arena fell deathly silent. Elder Malachi rose slowly from his seat, his ancient face carved with shock and something that might have been awe. "The challenge is decided," he announced. "Alpha Cormac has yielded and confessed to violating the sacred terms of combat. His lands are forfeit. His title is stripped. He is hereby declared packless, a rogue to be shunned by all." Cormac let out a broken sound, something between a sob and a snarl. But Seraphina wasn't looking at him anymore. She was running across the ice, shifting back to human form, dropping to her knees beside Fenris. "Fenris, Fenris, please." He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. The burn on his side was severe, but already beginning to heal. Alpha regeneration working. Over time. "You shifted," he rasped, a ghost of a smile crossing his battered face. "You almost died." "Worth it." He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek. "To see you like that. Magnificent." Tears streamed down Seraphina's face. "Don't ever scare me like that again. No promises." He winced as he tried to sit up. "But I think I'm starting to understand why the moon goddess paired us. You're terrifying." Despite everything, Seraphina laughed. Behind her, Odessa was dragged away by the obsidian guard, screaming curses. Cormac was hauled to his feet, his eyes empty with shock. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Fenris's hand in hers. What mattered was the bond humming between them, stronger than ever. What mattered was that she had finally stopped running. 3 days passed in something close to peace. Fenris healed with supernatural speed, though he milked the injuries shamelessly, demanding that Seraphina personally check his bandages far more often than necessary. She complained. She also smiled every time. But peace never lasted long in the world of wolves. On the 4th morning, she woke to find Fenris gone. A note on his pillow read, "Council emergency. Stay in our chambers. I'll explain everything soon. Our chambers, our bed." The casual possessiveness of it made her wolf purr with contentment, but the contentment died when the door burst open an hour later. It wasn't Fenris. It was Elder Isolde, flanked by 2 obsidian guards, and her face was grim. "You need to come with me," the elder said. "Now." They rushed through the citadel's winding corridors, descending deeper into the mountain than Seraphina had ever been. The air grew colder. The torches grew sparse. Finally, they emerged into an enormous underground chamber, and Seraphina's blood turned to ice. The chamber was filled with wolves. Hundreds of them, wearing silver masks, their armor emblazoned with a symbol that made her instincts scream. A crescent moon, broken in half. "The purifiers," Isolde whispered. "The descendants of those who carried out the Crimson Purge." At the center of the chamber stood Fenris on his knees. Chains of glowing silver wrapped around his wrists and throat, moon-forged restraints. Blood dripped from his temple, but his golden eyes blazed with fury. "Ah," said a voice like dry leaves scraping stone. The Lunaris heir arrives. A figure stepped forward, ancient, his eyes completely black, no whites or iris, just endless void. I am Vorinth, High Priest of the Purifiers. I have waited 200 years for this moment. Let him go, Seraphina demanded. I think not. Vorinth gestured, and 2 purifiers forced her to her knees beside Fenris. The Alpha King is leverage. You are the prize. Those abominations in your womb are the threat. His black eyes dropped to her stomach. The prophecy speaks of Lunaris twins born to a golden king, twins who will either unite all wolves or burn the old ways to ash. The bloodline ends tonight. Raised a ceremonial dagger etched with writhing runes. Seraphina, Fenris growled through gritted teeth. Run. Shift and run. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Our children are exactly why I'm staying. She met his eyes, and something passed between them. A understanding, a promise, a trust that transcended words. Then she closed her eyes and reached inside herself. The power was there, waiting, sleeping beneath the poison, dreaming beneath the pain. The twins had cracked the door open. Her first shift had pushed it wider. Now she tore it off its hinges. Moon Goddess, she called out, if you're real, if you're listening, I need you now. Light exploded from Seraphina's body, pure, blinding white radiance. The purifiers screamed, stumbling backward, their silver masks melting. Seraphina rose. The chains holding Fenris shattered like glass. Her eyes blazed white, twin stars in a face no longer entirely human. You dare. The voice was legion, ancient and terrible. You hunted my children. You thought the Lunaris extinct. She raised her hand toward Vorinth. Invisible force lifted him into the air. I am the moon's vengeance. She clenched her fist. Vorinth dissolved into silver motes that faded to nothing. The remaining purifiers fell to their knees not in attack, but in terrified supplication. Mercy, one of them begged. Please, goddess, mercy. Mercy was denied to my children for 200 years. The divine presence swelled, ready to annihilate every masked wolf in the chamber. But then Fenris's voice cut through the chaos. Seraphina. Just her name. Quiet, gentle, human. The white light flickered. Seraphina, come back to me. You've won. It's over. Come back. The goddess's fury warred with something softer. A mortal love, a mother's protectiveness, a woman's exhaustion. Slowly, impossibly, the light began to fade. Seraphina swayed. The divine presence receded, leaving her hollow and trembling. She would have collapsed if Fenris hadn't caught her. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got all 3 of you. She buried her face in his chest, and for the first time since her nightmare began, she let herself break. She cried for the years stolen by poison and cruelty, for the power she hadn't asked for and the destiny she couldn't escape. And Fenris held her through all of it. You're safe, he promised. You're home. Above them, the surviving purifiers remained frozen on their knees, too terrified to move. The Lunaris bloodline wasn't just alive, it had become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. 6 months later, the northern citadel was transformed. Banners of silver and gold hung from every tower. Flowers imported from the southern territories lined the great hall, their fragrance mixing with the scent of celebration. Wolves from every pack on the continent had gathered to witness history. Seraphina stood before the obsidian throne, dressed in a gown of white silk embroidered with crescent moons. A crown of woven moonstone and gold sat upon her pale hair. In her arms, wrapped in blankets of softest wool, were 2 infants. A boy with his father's golden eyes, a girl with her mother's violet. Fenris stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back. He looked at his family with an expression of wonder that he didn't bother to hide. People of the United Territories, Elder Isolde announced, her voice carrying across the silent hall. I present to you Queen Seraphina, the last Lunaris, and the Moon's Chosen. And I present to you the royal heirs, Prince Orion and Princess Selene. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. In the back of the hall, a figure watched from the shadows. Cormac Thorne, stripped of title and pack, stood as a mere spectator to the woman he had thrown away. Beside him, Odessa clung to his arm, but her belly, despite months of trying, remained flat. Barren. The mistress was barren. The irony was not lost on anyone. Cormac's eyes met Seraphina's across the crowded hall. She saw regret there, and longing, and a bitter understanding of everything he had lost. She felt nothing for him at all. She turned away, pressing a kiss to each of her children's foreheads. Fenris leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. 3 treasures, he murmured. I told my council I'd found 3 treasures worth more than all the gold in the realm. They thought I meant artifacts. Seraphina smiled, tears of joy slipping down her cheeks. And what do they think now? Fenris looked at her, his mate, his queen, the mother of his children, and his answering smile was brighter than the sun. Now they understand. The cursed bride was gone. The broken Omega was a memory. In her place stood a queen, a mother, and the most powerful wolf the world had seen in 200 years. And she was just getting started. If you loved this story and want more tales of rejected mates, hidden bloodlines, and sweet, sweet revenge, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.